Even on my OnlyFans, I posted this once and all my fans were like, well, I'm so delusional that I think that everyone who subscribes to me, like, only subscribes to me because they're so in love with me. And, like, that's delusional.
I definitely,
But that's my fantasy.
Yes. Yeah, so. I hear that.
This program contains coarse language and discusses mature themes. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome back to The Birds and the Bee with me, Chelsea B. And we are here with, as always, producer and Matt.
Hello, hello.
Producer and Matt.
He's a producer and a Matt.
And he's Matt. And also here with second-time guest, Battles.
Hi, thank you for having me back.
Of course. And then we are also here with Cassie Black, the safe slut.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So lovely to have you. I thought we could just have a little conversation, maybe talk a little bit both about what you do, and then we can dive into some deeper things. Battles, if you want to start.
Oh, yeah. So I think I was here last time just kind of like as a general participant. I think representation matters. I think like, you should never ick anyone else's ish, and that all relationships are valid, and to make sure that everyone is just, given their time in the spotlight and open and honest as they can be is, that's how I like to live my life. So
don't sound apologetic about it. Those are great perspectives to have.
Right, thanks.
Yes. And Cassie Black, the safe slut, if you want to delve into a little more about your name.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I started Safe Slut, which is just like a sex positive brand that's like all about empowerment and embracing your sexuality, as well as being as safe as possible while being as slutty as possible. And it started when I was diagnosed with genital herpes a little over 4 years ago. And yeah, there's so much stigma about herpes and it's so unnecessary and people are so uneducated. So it started with that. And then after creating my platform, I realized that there was so much more about sex that I wanted to talk about. And now I had this platform. So I'll talk a lot about like slut shaming or just like dating in general, feminism, all of that. And then about 1.5 years ago, I started doing sex work. So now I'm a herpes positive porn star.
I love it.
Yes.
And queen. What is the evolution of that been like for you from starting, this one platform? And how has that kind of influenced your sex work?
Yeah, well, to me, they're kind of the same. Like Safe Slut is Cassie Black. So it's just like an extension of the work that I was already doing. And I've like always wanted to be a porn star. And there's also, it's funny because there's so much stigma around herpes, but there's also so much stigma around sex work that I feel like the stigmas are very similar. So we're just here to break down taboos and all of that. So yeah, it's just been fun. And like, it's like obviously like a persona, but it's actually just like me and just being
Which
slutty.
I think is really important there are so many people who, go by different names, and then within that they create these different personas, and I feel like people and fans can kind of tell like a level of authenticity. And so when you actually bring your personality into it, it's a huge, like it's noticeable.
Yeah, because it's also just like helped me with like my personal self-confidence. It's like that's who I like want to be and like who I am. And it's just like brought it out of me. So it's been like really helpful, and it's also just really fun.
Yeah, yes. So do you identify as like polyamorous in your dating life as well, or like non-monogamous? No.
I am a Libra Venus. I am so monogamous. I have tried it multiple times to be poly, and I cannot do it.
Okay.
Maybe at some point. But no, I am monogamous.
Okay.
A monogamous slut. But the sex work obviously is like a job, so that's obviously different.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I feel like another community that is stigmatized is like the poly community.
Yeah.
And so like I'm curious, Battles, like how have you found yourself like in challenges from how long have you been poly, and how has that evolved to where you are now?
It's interesting because like I've never had like a conventional relationship. And I'm of a generation that like we weren't into these like new labels that are out there. So it's just like I knew I felt a certain way that I didn't have like the tools to define. And I don't know. And when I was kind of exploring all this, I was already in the city. I was already in the arts, which I think is just inherently like a more inclusive, kind of explorative community. And I feel super privileged to say, like, I was always, in terms of my found family, given the opportunity to just kind of explore me for me without any sort of like external judgment. And I know that's not so many people's narratives. It's just something that I was like super privileged to kind of explore. But yeah, I came to polyamory from a specific partner who I just was really really in love with at the time, and he kind of opened a door to a whole new world that I was aware that existed, but I didn't know that I could like kind of fit into that kind of lifestyle. And then when I was more educated and I, kind of explored how I wanted to broaden my horizons, I was like, oh, okay, this is actually a viable way to explore my love life. And yeah, I don't short story long, I never looked back. I was just like, oh, this is the thing that existed that I wasn't aware of, but that like fits everything that I'm kind of like looking to explore.
So were there any specific like challenges, be them emotional, be them...
Oh, yeah, sure. Because like I again, everything that was presented to me previously was like a very conventional kind of setup in terms of like, you are a woman, you're supposed to be with a man, and then you'll get married and like have kids. And that never appealed to me from like... It's so funny. Like, I remember even going into like high school, and I was, people were talking about like the guys that they wanted to marry and like kids that they wanted to have. And I was just like, oh no, that sounds terrible. I don't want to be sidled with that sort of like, that sort of constraint. So it was just kind of like going against that like inherent, this is the thing that I know that I want versus like, this is the thing that you are supposed to do. And then just kind of like coming to peace with like, those things are never going to coincide. And to find that is just like such peace. And then I think I mentioned before, like, your found family, it's just finding a community that embraces that. And if that doesn't, line up with the people that you are tied to with in terms of like familial ties, like, you have to prioritize that.
Interesting. So I want to come at it from a different perspective, from someone who has tried non-monogamy. What are the challenges that you faced? And, I don't want to say we're not able to overcome, but like, what were the challenges that made you decide like, okay, this is not for me?
Yeah, well, it's funny because most of my community is non-monogamous. Most of my friends are non-monogamous. So I feel like my values, like I've read The Ethical Slut a few times, like I know it, and like it just made sense. But I think I actually had a conversation recently with one of my non-monogamous friends because we were talking about how I just like can't do it. Even just like dating, like I have a hard time dating more than one person at a time. I just get really overwhelmed.
Okay.
And I probably have a lot of jealousy stuff to work through, which maybe I should do non-monogamy to work through it because it forces you to. But I do think that like, it's kind of like a sexuality in the sense I don't think you can just like choose it. I do think that you are just like either monogamous or non-monogamous. Like I think there's obviously toxic monogamy where like,
oh God,
that's a thing where like maybe like people would be monogamous.
Right.
But I think if everyone is like fully educated and there's like no stigma about it, I do think that people would like have the right way of knowing like what they are. And I just think it just didn't work for me. I can't think of any like specific challenges. It just like didn't feel right, but maybe just didn't feel right for me at this time because I'm also working through a lot of just like emotionally unavailableness in myself and all of this stuff. So maybe eventually, but
so I discovered you off field, which is a little bit ironic.
Well,
like,
you discovered my friend who's swiping for me on Field because I'm banned on Field.
Ah,
yeah.
okay.
So that's yeah. But yeah, I'm like, I love sex positivity, so I'm always like in those spaces, and like I feel like people are more open-minded.
So what does non-monogamy, or I guess monogamy, look like for you then? Because like, would you go to a sex party in a relationship, or is that considered? Because
I don't
for some
know,
people,
yeah.
emotional cheating is like not is like
Yeah.
it's like a what on a scale. For me as a monogamous person, I always thought, oh, if you kiss someone else, that's just playful fun. That's not monogamous or non-monogamous. It's
For
just
me, I have only been non-monogamous for like 2 years now, and before that, it was like kissing is cheating. That was not.
Well, you have to define the parameters of the relationship, and that
Yeah.
is such a fluid boundary for so many people.
And that's like, I feel like non-monogamy is there's no like one set in stone thing. Like it's going to be different for
Yeah,
everyone
exactly.
and their own boundaries. And I feel like for me, like the sex part, I could see myself being more open about. I think obviously, especially doing sex work, like I know that it can just be like a physical thing, and that's fine. So it would be, for me, it would be more the emotional part that I'd be like, no. And also like I'm like even on my OnlyFans, I posted this once, and all my fans were like, well, I like, posted a photo
excited to hear
and was
this.
like, I'm so delusional that I think that everyone who subscribes to me like only subscribes to me because they're so in love with me, and like that's delusional.
I definitely,
But that's my fantasy.
Yes. Yeah,
So.
I hear that. I definitely ascribe to the idea that I don't think that it's like human nature to be non-monogamous. I think that there are people who they thrive, and non-monogamy is where they're comfortable, but there are a lot of people where monogamy is for them and it works for them. I think and the fact that you've tried it, I think, says a lot about your perspective, and that's something that I can really like respect. And I mean, once I like with Matt was when I became non-monogamous, and I'm at a point where I don't know if I could ever go back to being monogamous. But I can also like I had to work through a lot of like personal, like I had to like really reflect and like, why am I feeling this way? What is fueling that? What do I need to do to work on that? So it came with a lot of like inner work and things like that.
And it's interesting too, because like my journey too was also tied to a specific person who was like kind of entrenched in that community. And then it was, I felt like I had a lifeline in a lot of ways to kind of like exploring the community and like knowing how that would work for me. And again, I feel like if you open yourself to a new experience, it just is a catalyst for you to grow. And even if you're like along down the line, if you're like, oh, this isn't for me, but you unlocked a little piece of yourself, or like you explored a little other, part of humanity that you would have been closed off to previously. I'm all about, for me personally, just like experiences, because life is so short. And I would love to like dip a toe into everything and just kind of see if like, does this fit? Great. I'm going to wear it. Does it not? I'm going to shed it because it doesn't serve me.
Kind of along the lines of like, sometimes you have to experience things that you think that you want in order to see what you don't want.
100%.
That's like that was like a lot of what I learned with traveling. Like I went off by myself, and I was like, I'm going to go for a year. And I like packed my backpack. And then a few months in, I was like, oh, I hate this. Actually,
I just want to shower.
I just want like my home. I was like living in other people's homes and just being like, well, I want to live in my own home now.
well, I'm sorry to break it to you,
Yeah.
but you are still
I'm still not. Spoiler alert, but we're on our way. You had mentioned chosen family, but I do want to know if, and in your respective, like being poly and being a sex worker, are you open with your actual families? Do they know what you do? We can start with Cassie,
Mine do now.
which we're laughing, but I feel like it's not a funny thing.
I'm laughing as a mechanism.
Okay.
So I was outed. Backstory. I am from a big Italian Catholic family.
Noted.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Irish Catholic, yep.
So similar vibe. And yeah, so I'm the youngest of 5, and I was outed to 2 of my siblings, and with that, like, didn't really go super great. And I don't want to like talk too much about like their thing because they didn't consent to me like telling the story, but I ended up coming out to my family because they already knew. So I was like, all right, now's the time. And also I wanted to do it before I had a few mainstream scenes coming out. So I wanted to make sure I did it before that, because like OnlyFans, it's behind a paywall. Like you really have to like know you want to find it to find it. But I've been on the Pornhub homepage for like a week now.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm actually like really obsessed with it.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like really
amazing.
hot.
Yes, I love it.
I love it too. So I was like, I want to make sure I tell them before that. And I think that, I mean, the reason I'm doing this also is because of the stigmas about it. So knowing that I think it went as best as it probably could for now. I think, yeah, it's just something that's going to take time. But I am grateful for like chosen family as well. Like I have an incredible support system of friends here. And we were talking before we started about how New York is amazing.
Yes.
And I was in Boston before, and there's obviously some great people there. But the open-mindedness of people in New York and like the sex positive scene are amazing.
Yes,
and
agree.
it's been so helpful having other friends who are either sex workers or not, like having support from them. It made it like so much easier when it's been like really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Battles.
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting because I remember this like definitive moment. I came from like a super conservative Irish Catholic upbringing. I didn't know homosexual people, bi people, like definitely not polyamorous growing up. It was just like such a, I came from a very conservative town in West Virginia. And I remember having this conversation with my mom because I knew like I was different, but I didn't have like the tools or the self-awareness to kind of like articulate what I was feeling. But I was like, we were talking about having unconventional like families. And I said, like, well, you know, there are so many people out there who just want to have loving families. And like, what if I met this amazing woman and we were both committed to each other and like we wanted to start a family? Like, would you think, you know, adoption would be a viable option for us? And she's like, absolutely not. Like, why would you introduce a child into these challenges, and like growing up is hard enough? And I was like, but we're committed to each other. Like, we love this child. And like, how would this home not be, you know?
And how many children grow up without love?
Right.
What you would do is to bring a child into a partnership or an open, like a relationships with love.
Yeah. And again, just to show how kind of backward this is, she was like, oh, well, I know this like biracial couple, and like how hard it is for them to like have kids that don't identify in any race. And I was like, I feel like that's different. But again, like I was so young, I didn't have the tools to like kind of articulate my feelings. And then I remember I went through kind of like a hard breakup where it was just like, you know, there was it kind of came off the back of another breakup. So I was like really kind of emotionally shattered. And I don't want to open up to my parents knowing that, you know, I'm not going to necessarily they're not going to come up from like a place of understanding. But I was just like, I'm having a really hard time here. And I was trying to articulate the things that I really liked about this person, that they were so intelligent, that they were bisexual, and like other things that just like I kind of identified with. And my mom just like kind of sighed and was like, I'm like, oh, Mom, you know I'm bi, right? Like that's part of my whole identity. And she's like, well, yeah, I know, but like it was just such a like a flippant kind of like innocuous side comment, but it felt good to say like, all right, this is what I am. And then for her to say like, yeah, I know, I get it, I've always known. So it was such a casual thing, but to just kind of articulate it and like, this is my truth. This is, you know, this is me. And, you know, that was kind of it. And I think we've been more accepting of each other's perspectives since that moment, even though it wasn't like a full-on conversation. And we may never see eye to eye, but again, it's just like, to have these dialogues as difficult. And again, this is a luxury that some people do not have. And I want to absolutely acknowledge that. But I feel like in any situation, the more open and true you can be to yourself and, you know, to your lifestyle, come from just like a place of seeking to understand and like have a dialogue, the better you can make the world. Oh my God, that's so cheesy, but like truly, yeah.
It's real. It makes sense. Matt, as both a non-monogamous person and a person who's heavily involved in like sex work and this podcast that we do, are you out with your family?
Well, you kind of told my brother and sister-in-law for us. So in that case,
That was
yes,
my
I
bad.
am. But yeah, give her 2 old fashions, and she says more than she means to.
Okay.
But
Called out.
as far as my parents, I that's one day at a time type of thing, and I don't tell them about the content we do. They kind of know about the podcast, but I told them in terms of like sort of a non-monogamous resource for people in the community, trying to help people in terms of advocacy, mental health, that sort of thing. But my mom smells bullshit pretty easily. So even though that is the case, she says, whatever you're doing, it's wasting time and you need to make more money than what you're making now.
Not the healthiest
So
stuff.
there's a lot to be said. And so I come from like this sort of like Dan Savage philosophy of it's okay to have that be separate because you need to preserve your own mental health.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in that. It's a way to protect yourself, and that's okay. And that's just where I'm at right now. I have to just have different spheres, a public sphere and a private sphere. And for me, that's stability. But I mean, all my friends have, I've been open with them forever. And I don't think I have friends that I'm not open with, or else they probably wouldn't be friends. But in terms of that, college friends, undergrad, graduate school friends, like they all know what I do. So
It just sucks too. I think from this coming from any angle is like when you prioritize like your fiscal integrity versus like your mental health or your happiness. It's like, well, are you making money? Well, am I happy? Like, and it just sucks that in a capitalist society, like that's where we're at. But like, why do we always have to put so much emphasis on like how much money you're making versus like how happy you are?
I have a lot of pandemic debt, so I owe a lot of people money.
Sure.
So it's an actually, if you look at my finances, you'd be like, oh shit, Matt, you do need to make a lot of money. So,
Fair enough.
yeah.
So I guess another question that I have is, do you have friends that are not like, do you have battles? Do you have monogamous friends? And do you have questions that they ask? And then Cassie, do you have friends who are not in the industry and that you're open with? And what questions do they have? So we'll start battles with you.
Yeah, I just had this conversation this afternoon. In fact, it's just like
Convenient.
Yeah, how about it?
Love it when it works
It's like
out.
I mentioned the podcast.
Hell yeah.
I had this friend, Chris, who was, pretty heteronormative, and he was under the impression that like polyamorous relationships just like cannot work fundamentally. Either someone's going to get jealous, or there's going to be like, he again brought in like the fiscal kind of reality of like, all right, well, how are your finances tied? And like if 2 people want to go on a trip and a 3rd person can't, like what does that look like? And I was just like, well, it all comes down to communication. Just like have open, honest communications and conversations with your partner regardless. And, these things can be worked through, but you have polyamorous representation in media, but so rarely does it end in like, and they all lived happily ever after. It's just like, well, someone wasn't forthcoming in the polyamorous aspect of the relationship, or, like someone again got jealous and then it didn't work. It's just like, no, relationships work or they don't. Heteronormative relationships, half of them end in some sort of like divorce or
It's like
decoupling.
40% of marriages end in divorce.
100%. So it's like relationships are hard, full stop. But relationships can also work under any circumstance. So to just kind of like say definitively like polyamory doesn't work, but that seems to be what's portrayed in like the common media, which I think is like really unfortunate. So yeah, I if I could impart anything, is just like, it's hard. So like, just if 2 people or 3 people or 4 people find each other and they're like, we're gonna make this work, fucking great, because most people can't.
Yeah, and I'm very tired of like this older generation saying, oh, these kids, they all want to be non-monogamous, or they're all content creators, things were so simple for us. I'm like, no, you all got divorced and fucked us up.
Yeah.
So if you're implying that this current generation is fucked up, you're the one who did the fucking up.
Well, also we're so much more like open too, and like we're willing to like say like, hey, here's where I'm coming from, here's what I like, versus just like repress, normative,
I think they're just scared.
It all comes down to fear. 100%.
I'm sorry that you stayed in your really toxic relationship for 60 years.
You cheated instead,
and it's like
just repressed all that
and
cheating.
you make all like, I hate my wife jokes, and
Right.
you're like, but you actually mean
We talked
it.
about that too, like how that's just like Chris was saying like, oh, like he just bought a house and he wants to have all this junk away or hauled away, and he's just like, yeah, take the wife instead. And I was like, that doesn't age well, sir.
No,
Like,
you're just perpetuating a lot of
100%.
stereotypes.
A lot of our parents divorced, so we're just trying to find a different solution to the inevitable cheating that occurs. And we looked at you as the model, and we saw what was not working, so we're trying to figure out our own solutions. And they might be a little bit messy, but we're just trying something different.
Yeah.
Cassie,
So I was trying to think of what people have asked me, and I feel like because I've been talking about like sex stuff on Safe Slut for so long, and like to my friends too, they're just like more excited than anything. So they're more just
That's
like,
great.
ooh, how was the shoot?
Yeah.
Like, tell me about it. And like and I'll like send them like clips, and they'll be like, oh my God, watching my friend like deep throat.
yes, we love supportive friends.
Yeah, so it's like really nice. But I did have a conversation with a group of friends last night who don't know as much about it, and they didn't ask questions, but they were more like shocked that I have a completely separate bank account for OnlyFans and Fansly and Loyal Fans, because you can get shut down real quick.
Yeah.
So they don't know like the stigmas around just like having that. They just assume that like, or just people assume that like you're making so much money on OnlyFans, and like when I'm like, it's so much work, and like I've been like the top
Every
like
time.
6% for like a while, and like I'm making like fine, but it's not like I'm not quitting my job,
Right.
Like, so yeah, they were shocked to find that out, and then I was telling them about how Pornhub is blocked in Texas, Virginia, North Carolina, I think, a few other states. I started writing for Pornhub, and a friend messaged me and she was like, I can't even read your article because it's on the Pornhub like sexual wellness site. So people are just more shocked when they find out how much actual like stigma we face. So then they have questions about that, and they're like, what the fuck?
yeah I feel like the misconceptions, or like when people get surprised, is like the stigma and how difficult it is to actually like make a living from it, and the amount of work that it is.
It's so
It
much
is a
work.
job.
I have a bedazzled shirt that says sex work is work.
I
And
love
I
it.
need to wear it more, but
Yes.
it's so true. Like it's also so exhausting explaining to people why it's so much work.
It's work explaining how much work it is.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like done. I'm just like, I can't even have these conversations anymore. I just like, I'm so over it.
Yeah.
That's where I point people to the podcast. It's like, you got all the same questions. Here's the episode.
Yep.
Here you go.
Yeah. So are there questions that you get from like fans like that are consistent, or subscribers,
What's your
or
FAQs?
yeah, or even just from like the Safe Slut persona and brand? Like,
I think for me, just because I am openly herpes positive, a lot of people are like, how are you doing this with herpes?
how are you?
You just it's the same thing as doing it in real life. You just disclose and have the conversation, and there you go. And the funny thing is, like, so many people in the industry have herpes.
I feel like so many people
Just
in general.
and that's what I was gonna say. It's just because
It's not
most
common
people
in
have herpes.
STI tests. Like in panels, like I get tested like every few weeks, and it's not one of the. it's,
for like
it's not
talent
tested.
tested, it's not
because
included.
Yeah.
it's just assumed that you
No
have
one,
it.
if it's positive, no one would be working.
Yeah,
We cannot do
exactly.
it.
100%.
So most people are just like, like asking questions about how I do it that way. That's like pretty much it. And or also they're just like, are you liking it? And whatever. And like, are you feeling like safe and stuff like that? And I'm like, yes.
Yeah. I also saw, I was creeping, I saw that you have like products that you have, like oils and like bath blends and things. So how did that kind of evolve? I really love that.
Yeah. So I'm an esthetician and herbalist. So before I even got herpes, I had a brand called Wisecraft Herbals.
Nice.
My last name is Wise.
Okay.
And it's like witchcraft.
Love it.
So I was making like tinctures and stuff, and I've always been into like body care and skincare, all of that. So when I got herpes, I was like, oh, let me make some products for myself for my outbreaks. They worked really well. So I was like, let me share these with people.
Yeah, we'll
So,
plug your site too for sure. That's so cool.
So it's fun to like have safe slut because people are like, what do you do with it? And I'm like, that's another question. I'm like, I don't know how to like say it in like one like little like elevator pitch. Like there's so many different things I do with it. Like I also do Reiki or like support calls. I do a lot of writing on Patreon, support groups, like in-person events. I sell sex toys. I have merch. Like,
love it.
there's so many ways to support me and give me money.
There's an ecosystem here.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, all of that has just, I'm sure, involved so much work.
I'm exhausted all the time.
Yeah.
What's the advocacy like? The calls?
So it's just, I do support calls for people with herpes. And usually, like, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. So I'm very open about that. And I'm just like, it's basically like peer support. It's usually about dating and like how to navigate dating and disclosing more than like outbreaks in general. Because people are fine. They're like, they can handle that. It's not a big deal. But I think people's biggest concern is like, how do I disclose this? How do I date? And it's funny that most of my people are like, also sex workers or polyamorous. So a lot of it, I talk a lot about like how to be polyamorous as a herpes positive person.
It's also monogamous.
Who's also monogamous. Well, also people just assume I'm poly all the time, which is, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. But I have a lot of friends who are herpes positive and poly, and we have conversations all the time. So I've been in those spaces. Like I go to play parties and I do all of that. It's just,
And it just seems like everything kind of can be distilled into like communicate. Like no matter what it is.
That is the biggest thing I always say.
It's so true.
Just talk about it. I'm writing an article right now about like how to have like conversations about like pleasure and consent, sexual health for Pornhub, which will come out April 8th or 15th. And literally it's just like, just have the conversation, just talk about it.
Talk.
It doesn't ruin the mood. It's still hot. Like you're still talking about sex and whatever. It's hot.
I always feel safer when those conversations
God,
are had.
of
I'm more
course.
excited to play.
Yeah.
I'm more excited to get
Exactly.
involved.
Because you get unlocked. Like whatever like little barrier you've put in front of yourself for this like self-preservation thing just gets like knocked down. You're like, all right, I feel safe. I feel open. Let's go.
The amount of times I've disclosed that people were like, wow, like I'm so turned on because they're like, that's so like big of you to do that, even though it's not. It should be bare minimum. Everyone should be doing that. But it just makes people feel safer, or they can trust me and all of that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I once had someone, a potential hookup situation, and she disclosed, and I was like, okay, all right, then we can have that conversation. Like, she was already at my place at that point. I'm like, are you on antivirals? We can talk. And then she was just, I feel like she was just so thrown off by the fact that I didn't like shame her on the spot, that she didn't know what to do with this information. And she's like, I should leave. I'm like, no, you can hang out. It's like, you know, like a deer caught in headlights. I felt terrible about it. You know, I felt that like there was a lot that she was carrying with that. So
Yeah, I think the word shame is just like such an applicable word in all of these different communities. And the question is like, how do we get rid of that? How do we stop making people feel ashamed for just existing as they are? And I think all of these things, like talking here, having your platform, having your brand, is like step one, you know, is just talking about it.
Because I would argue there's something shameful about staying into like, you know, a monogamous, heteronormative relationship where you're
Adults
being
is air quoting.
sorry, yes, I'm air quoting here. That you're being abused or like hit. Like if scenario doesn't suit you, get out, no matter what that is. And I just hate that there's such a pass for if you meet these certain constraints of like a relationship with like, oh well, you know, you're a guy and a girl, and like sometimes it gets physical, but that's okay because like, you know, in the eyes of the Lord, it's like, no, then none of this is okay.
Yeah. Or the mentality that sex workers are all traumatized and need to be saved.
No. Or they have like
No, this is
sexual
actually
trauma in their past.
It's like you can also have trauma in your past and then also like be actively choosing to be a sex worker. Like they do not have to be mutually exclusive.
I'm doing this because it's hot and I love it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I'm a very sexual person.
Yeah.
Like
it's how I express myself.
Exactly.
It's liberating. It's fun. You
And
make
I'm,
money.
Yeah, I'm not ashamed of seeing myself on Pornhub. Like, I don't care if you do as well.
It is another way. Like, to me, like doing sex work has been another way of destigmatizing sexuality. Like,
Amen.
I did one of my pro scenes, I did a casting couch scene, and in the conversation piece, I talked about like being herpes positive, and so like I think it's cool to be able to be like talk about these things, then also be a slut and like film it all. Like there's just it's just really cool to like combine it and hopefully break down the stigmas that way.
Yeah, you do a little bit of that with the type of porn that you strive to make, and it's it wasn't quite defined at first, and then you're like, okay, I kind of want to change things based on the type of porn that I'm making.
I want to make porn that I want to watch and that I'm proud to publish.
Not just giving into market trends.
Right.
Well, isn't that art in general? I feel like you can make that argument for any artistic endeavor.
I see my porn as art.
My porn is totally art.
Art, yes.
Yeah. And I started making like actual like art porn. So I did a first film. It's coming out next month. I filmed it with Caden, actually, who you guys had on the podcast. I love him. Yeah, he's great. So my friend filmed it, and we had this concept of just like, it's very like witchy, artsy, like it's all in like red lighting and spooky, and it's about like breaking down like toxic relationship patterns, and we're like chained together. It's like very cool, and to me like that is art. That is literally art.
1,000%.
Yeah, it's like very beautiful.
And it's not like the like hospital fluorescent lighting, and it's just like a woman just with like 7 cocks in her, which I'm
dying to film a gangbang. I am dying to film a gangbang. Dying to film a blow bang. I want all of it.
As a person I love my gangbang. Yeah, I love the filmed, but it's like I just feel like for so long there was like, and like as an avid porn watcher, even it's just this like one consistent like, I don't know. And then there was a lot of like incest porn and like cheating porn, which again, no judgment. Like I don't ick anyone's.
I get the fetish. Yeah, it's like it's
totally. But that's not what I want to see. Yeah. So that's not what I don't make that. So I think also just being thoughtful in like the choices has been very liberating for me and makes me feel good about what I'm doing. And like I'm not fully out with my family. Like we have enough difficulties just conversing in general. So that's, battles. I don't know if I asked you this specific question last time, but what I like to ask is, what advice would you give to like, did I ask you this last time?
Yeah, and I will reiterate my answer because I feel like it's just so universally applicable is communication.
Yes.
Being as open and honest as you can possibly be with any human being. And then maybe on the back of this conversation is to not be afraid to like advocate or educate, even if it may be on initially, non-receptive ears. Like, hopefully, if it comes from a place of truth and passion, like you'll like make a little burrow of something to like for something someone to ruminate on. Again, just being as open, communicative, and honest as possible, and to be steadfast in your platform.
Okay. So, Cassie, the question is, what advice would you give to newbie Cassie? So after, you've evolved for however long you've been doing this, what would you tell the Cassie who's just getting started?
It's funny because I feel like I'm just getting started.
Okay, fair.
So it's hard to say.
Okay.
Like I've been doing OnlyFans for like a year and a half, but most of it was just me like doing solo stuff, playing around. Like I feel like I started doing like porn in November.
Okay.
So I still feel new, but I think I'm not like just turned 18. Like I've been in the sex industry for a while now, so I feel really grounded. But I do think at the beginning I was kind of getting overwhelmed and thinking that I had to say yes to everything.
Yes.
And I was approached by a company that I was like, oh, I don't know. It's a little bit past my boundaries. The pay was pretty sweet, but I said no.
Okay. Yeah. And follow your gut. And I ended up hearing some really bad things about them after I said no. So I'm glad I said no.
Yes. So just continuing that of just, you don't have to say yes to everything, especially when it comes to like my safety and everything. And then also just like go for it. I think it took me a while to fully be out as a sex worker and like really do it because I was like quiet on OnlyFans for a bit. But now totally out, and it feels really good to do it.
I found that like the more people that I tell, like I told my boss what I do, and it was so liberating for me, like not having to like have secrecy and like, what are you doing this weekend? And I'd be like, oh, I don't know, but like I'm filming like
Now you're like, I'm filming
collabs.
porn.
Yeah, so it's really nice to be open. And
You might be listening because you told him about the podcast,
I
too.
sent him a link. Yeah, he
I love
asked
it.
to listen to
Yeah,
it.
my bosses at my like vanilla job know, and I had to take time off to fly to Vegas to shoot the scenes, and like they knew I was doing OnlyFans, like they follow Safe Slut, so they get it.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, I'm doing like porn, and he was like, oh, like Brazzers, and I was like, not yet.
Oh, we'll get there
soon.
Yes.
But he was like, okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of surprising, like, because I'm usually pretty open with everyone I meet, and like the more old fashions that I have, the more I'm like, and also I do OnlyFans, and like
Give me like half a shot of tequila,
Right.
and
Just, like,
I'm handing out stickers with my QR code.
yeah, but I'm always like really surprised that like people are very open to, they're very receptive, and they're just like, oh, that's cool, and then I go on my tangent about how much work it is, and like you don't even know. Yeah, but people are like a lot, and I think that I am with a privilege to have the audience of New York, and like we've talked about before, like it's just a very, like maybe it is a bubble in that sense, but I have just found a lot of openness in these many communities in which I feel like I fit. Yeah, so it's I think surrounding yourself with people, with the chosen family is really important in your own growth and your own learning, to have like those support systems.
And I think in this city in general, like I feel like people respond really positively to passion. It's just like if you approach any subject matter with like conviction, intelligence, and thoughtfulness, people are like, oh, okay, I can get on board with that, or like at least like I appreciate your humanity, and like I understand your perspective here, and God, what a fucking blessing, you know?
Yeah, genuinely though. Is there final thoughts? Any final messages you want to get out there to advocate? We'll obviously put all of your, your links and things out there.
Be kind to each other.
Like, hard agree.
Like,
Hard agree.
I'm just so corny, but like, man, life is so hard. And if someone finds joy in anything, like how dare you put the kibosh on that?
Yeah.
Just all trying to figure it out.
Yeah, truly.
We
No
live
one
in such
has
like
the
a
answers.
critical world now. It's like, let people do whatever they
Like we're all
As long
gonna
as-
die at some point.
Yes.
Just let us, like,
Exactly.
live.
Yeah.
As long as your lifestyle, and it shouldn't, like, has any sort of like negative impact directly over someone else. Like you can't say like, I'm just gonna go on a murder spree this weekend.
Yeah,
and
right.
That's cool.
With limitation.
Yeah, 100%.
Limit your murder
With
spree to
consent. Anything that's like
couple
consensual.
people.
Yeah.
Right. Limit your murder
Let's put
spree
the brakes on the
to my
murders.
list. Just kidding. Yes.
But yes, within reason.
Okay. Yeah. Cassie.
I always say this on every podcast.
Okay.
If you're herpes positive, you can still be a slut.
Yes. Hard agree. I love
That's the tea.
love what you're doing. I
Spill
love
it.
this. Yes. Yeah. I need to get you one of my slut mugs.
I must have that.
that
Yeah.
I made this.
You make that?
I
That's so
did.
cute.
Yay, thank you. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you all so much for your time, for being here, also for being you as individuals. I think these conversations are, really important, and we're doing our little part to reduce the stigmas that are so prevalent in the communities that we're in, or about the communities. Yeah. All right. Thank you for watching. We'll be back. And so lovely to have you here. Okay, bye.